Hello, everybody out there. Good to see you all, and thanks again for joining another WorldViz webinar. We're happy to have you. We're just going to give it one more minute because we're almost at the 9 o'clock start time here. Seeing some familiar names joining in the attendees here, so excited to have you all. Yeah. So thanks everybody who's signing into the webinar today. Sato Rabouti is going to be our main presenter. Sato, of course, is our Vizard product manager, and as you may know, as you likely know if you're on our WorldViz email list, then Vizard 7 was released in the last couple of months. So today's webinar topic is really just going to be a deep dive into the new features, and for those of you who aren't super familiar with Vizard, it'll also have some kind of introductory material as well, and just some kind of interesting anecdotes about how some of our users are taking advantage of some of these cool features. So give me 1 second here. I'm going to go ahead and introduce the group. So we've got Matthias Push also on the phone today, and he'll be participating. And Sato, like I said, is going to be our main person, our main go-to person today. So just if you haven't ever seen us do this before, we have a Q&A, and at the very end where folks can submit their questions throughout the webinar. And as we go through and do this, please just send us your questions through the chat, and we'll do our best to answer them at the end. So stick around for the live Q&A at the very end there. My name's Dan. If you guys haven't met me before, I'm the head of sales here at America. And Sato, of course, is our Vizard product manager. So let's just dive right in. Here are the topics for today. We'll be getting into this in a little bit more detail. I'm just going to be giving a super brief introduction to WorldViz, and then who our main Vizard users are. And then these are just the really kind of key features that are being added to Vizard or updated for Vizard 7. So Sato's going to go through these one by one and really kind of give us a nice picture of how things have changed with Vizard 7. After that, we're going to be doing the live Q&A at the very end. So like I said, stick around. Without further ado, WorldViz, if you are new to hearing from us, we've been around since 2002. So one of the longest running VR companies. We've always been focused exclusively really on the R&D market, and that's touched a bunch of different industries, primarily psychology, but also aerospace, defense, engineering. So over the years, we've seen a lot of things change, and Vizard has been kind of our core product throughout this entire time. So that's just a little bit about us. I just kind of also want to talk a little bit more about who our primary users for Vizard are. So the really main group that we work with is primarily academic researchers in a whole bunch of different fields. And if you actually haven't had a chance, every year we produce a report called our Partners in Science report. And it goes through between 100 and 200 academic papers that are published every year using our technology. So if you haven't had a chance to see that yet, we'll actually link it out at some point in the chat here. But it's a really great resource just to see what people are doing with Vizard. A lot of social psychology work. This is a picture of the famous kind of empathy projects that Stanford did using Vizard. A lot of interesting computer science, kinesiology kind of motion studies. So it's really super broad user group in the academic research fields. Then more on the commercial side, the enterprise side, we have a number of different types of users. Industrial would be, I would say, probably one of our biggest players, and that's for traditional kind of engineering applications like, design review, if you've got an architectural walkthrough you're trying to do, construction applications, any kind of like prototyping if you've got a new product that you want to, do design review ahead of time, and then also, doing factory walkthroughs, safety training, things like that. So that's more on the enterprise side. What we've really seen in the last couple of years that's been huge has been training. And we actually did an entire webinar on training, I think 6-7 months ago, way at the beginning of the pandemic. And if you haven't had a chance to check out our webinar recordings, they're all on our YouTube channel. So we'll also be sending a link out to our previous webinars if you haven't had a chance to check them out. Like I said, if you have any questions about any of these things, you can get in touch with us at any time, either through the questions or you can email sales@worldviz.com, and we'd be happy to answer any of your questions. The final thing that I'll say, just that people are using Vizard for, kind of interesting, is just as a sales and marketing tool itself. So you can actually show products. You know, we see this a lot in the healthcare space, where people will show more complex things like MRI machines in a virtual environment because it's hard to take those on the road. So now that you guys know a little bit more about who's using Vizard, let's go ahead and hand it over to Sato, who's going to walk us through the features. So Sato, I'm going to hand it over to you. Wait, right before we hand it over to Sato, I actually have a poll that I want to send out, just to kind of get a better sense for who all is using, who's in the audience today. So if y'all don't mind taking just a second to answer this poll. We've got training development, nice seeing the answers coming in, so this is great. This is really kind of helping us know who our audience is today, and kind of helping, you know, tweak the message on the fly, if you know what I'm saying. So academic research is a huge contributor so far, so that's definitely, you know, lining up with the work that we're seeing. I'll leave the poll open for one more second. Looks like we've got a pretty high participation rate. So, and I'll go ahead and I'll publish it now. So as you guys can see, almost all academic research. Then some nice training and development.
Hey,
definitely.
Dan, we can't see it. We can't see the poll right now as participants.
Oh, I've got to share it. Sorry. There's one more button I have to click. There we go. So now you guys can see there's the academic.
It's already gone again. It was just visible
gosh.
for very short, but here it is. Okay, cool.
There we go. There we go. So now you guys can all see it. Thanks for bearing with me through the GoToWebinar experience. As you can see, almost everybody here is an academic researcher, and then also a good amount in training development, which is awesome because, like I said, that's definitely where we're seeing some growth here. Be curious to know what the other is, but let us know in the chat if you like. And from here, I'm going to go ahead and hide the poll and hand it over to Sato. So here comes Sato.
Yeah, perfect.
Right. Okay, give me 1 second. Okay, so before I go into the new features of Vizard 7, I'm just going to go kind of quickly over just an overview of Vizard. And this is going to be a pretty short webinar, so it's not going like step by step on every feature, but just kind of like a higher level of what the features are and just a little bit of how they work. And so, yeah, so for those of you not familiar with Vizard, which I'm assuming everybody here is, but it consists of 3 main elements. So there's the Python-based development environment where you add your code, and you can see it's very little amount of code that you need just to kind of get a scene going. And then the VizConnect kind of hardware configurator where you can connect over 150 different hardware peripherals, so things like 3D projection systems, all the major headsets, haptics, hand controllers, full body motion tracking, things like that, and then a lot of presets for the common systems. And then also the 3D world builder that we call Inspector, so that kind of gives you the ability to, basically you can use that to set up your scene, but also just to inspect models and do things like add lighting and swap textures and things like that. So those are kind of like the 3 main elements. 1 second. And also just wanted to point out there's a lot of resources you can use if you're still kind of learning all the things that Vizard can do. So we have our YouTube channel, the tutorials, and our documentation. And then we have our knowledge base also, so we could share links with you after the webinar. And I also wanted to point out, so now there's just a YouTube video I just made actually on just going through the basics of creating an experiment with Vizard, where you're getting models off Sketchfab and then being able to set them up in Inspector, set up your hardware, and then be able to collect data on those objects and save that to a file. And it's a pretty quick kind of just overview on going through Vizard, if you might find that helpful. And so as far as the new features of Vizard 7, the first thing I was going to go over, which is the upgrade from Python 2 to 3. And so, as you're probably aware, the previous versions of Vizard were using Python 2, but now as a Vizard 7, we're using the Python 3 interpreter. And while there's a lot of new features and improvements, there's also some incompatible changes that might cause some issues with your older scripts. But one of the things that we provided that makes that easy to deal with is we have a Python 2 to 3 conversion tool as part of Vizard 7 now. And so I can actually switch over to Vizard and show you. So if you go up here to edit, and it's just right there in Python 2 to 3. And so in here, this is just showing the path of the file that you're wanting to convert. And you can check this box here where it says convert all Python files and in the same folder and all the subfolders. If you click on simulate conversion, it won't actually make any changes, but it'll output what changes it's going to make in the interactive window, and that way you can apply those yourself or see what it's going to change. And then, yeah, and then you just click convert. Let me go back over to the slides. And if it's going to make changes, it also saves. It'll save a backup file in the same directory with the .bak. And some of the things that the automatic converter will change is the changes to the print function with Python 3, the list and iterative variants, and also all the modules and functions that were renamed. It will automatically update those. One of the things that it's not going to automatically update is the way the handling of strings in regards to the separation of text and binary data. So that's something that you'll have to manually adjust. And then I also wanted to point out that so when you're loading modules, Python will cache the compiled code into a PYC file. So in Python 2, those were just added a C, so it created a PYC file in that same directory. In Python 3, it just now creates a subdirectory called PyCache. And so if you have maybe PYC files that your script is relying on, you'll have to keep in mind that now it's going to move those over to a folder called PyCache. And also, all of this is more available in more detail in the Vizard 7 documentation, where you go to like updating to Vizard 7. It'll give you all the walkthrough of all the changes from Python 2 to 3. And you can also go to this website, portingguide.readthedocs.io/en/latest, and see all the changes for Python 2 to 3. And then while we're talking about Python, I also just wanted to point out, if any of you are not familiar with using the Python package manager. So here in Vizard, if you just go to Tools, Package Manager, and this is pretty useful, where you can go and search for different Python libraries, and it'll just automatically install it into the Vizard environment here. You can show which ones you have installed, or you could do a pip command and then be able to install maybe a certain version of a Python library. And so that's, yeah, just kind of a brief coverage of some of the Python 2 to 3 changes. And I wanted to point out with that conversion tool that it's not going to be too daunting to convert a lot of your scripts. I mean, I've actually myself been able to convert a whole bunch of different scripts just using that conversion tool. So that works pretty well. And so now I wanted to actually switch over to Matthias, where he's going to talk about some of the Python libraries that we find useful and interesting.
Yeah, well, get my camera going here. Thanks, Sado, so you can see me. I just figured I give a little bit of flavor to the theory here about the libraries that can be added to Python. And as Sado has just shown, there's literally thousands of libraries that are available for Python, which is pretty amazing, because it gives you, just by loading a library, it suddenly gives you a whole bunch of new functionality. But the one that, like there's three that I want to point out that I've seen specifically useful for customer. Like the first one I want to point out, it's kind of a more modern thing. It's Arduino support. And you all, if you have kids or relatives, you might have noticed that these days, even in school, they are building drones and robots and everything. And what's behind that is it's pretty much shrink wrap programmable technology. These Arduino boards that can be programmed and that can control motors and other things like real life things from a computer. And so like with a Python library that supports that, it's effectively now possible to control through this from Vizard any kind of like real life motors, engines, switches, whatever you want. And that obviously can be used in a very creative ways to add to a simulation. For example, just I made a couple examples, but just if you have a simulation where someone perceives like moving air or wind, like you can switch a fan on and off. If there is something that gives you the impression there's heat, like a heat source, you can put a real heat source in the space and switch it on and off from the simulation, right? And you can, with motors and servos and everything, shutter classes, you can control almost everything in the real world, like out of a Vizard app, which is pretty cool, and it allows you to control that in a time synchronized fashion with your simulation. So I guess, Sado, I need you to switch me to the next slide here real quick. And sorry about that, because Sado is still in control here. The other one I wanted to point out is PySerial, which we have seen used over many years, and a lot of times by researchers who want data synchronization, in many cases with fMRI data, where you basically just want to know when is the onset of a graphics file, when does a person see something exactly by the millisecond, and synchronize that with your data that you're recording from a force plate or fMRI or whatever else. And so PySerial is actually something that's used for that. It's kind of handy to have. And the next one, Sado, is the big one. That's effectively a library that even I have used. I've used Vizard myself. It was not called Vizard at the time. It was called VRUT, but I've used it myself like well over 20 years ago for my own final thesis. And I even at that time, I used Matplotlib in order to analyze my data. And by the time my subjects walked out of the room, I had the full data analysis done, including adjusted the graphs for the subject data. And I found this extremely handy that you have these kind of analytical capabilities directly in your visualization environment, and all the way down to like output graphics. People who leverage that, I think most of them will really love that. You kind of don't have to jump over into MATLAB or SPSS. You can do it right on the spot. But anyway, handing back to Sado, just wanted to point out a couple of these libraries that are super useful. So thanks. Sado, I guess your web camera.
Yeah. Okay, so thanks. And yeah, so those kind of see how you can add functionality to Vizard with just a whole bunch of Python libraries that you can search for and use in your scripts. So the next thing I wanted to talk about in regards to Vizard 7 updates is the Arc Teleport transport, which that's been available to use, just adding that in code before, but now that's added to our VizConnect GUI. So you can just even going to the common presets, they have now the Arc Teleport built in by default. So basically on the right-hand controller, it'll allow you to teleport around. So you press down, like on, for instance, on the Vive, the trackpad to where you want to teleport, and then you let go and you'll be transported to that area. So that Arc Teleport, if you're not familiar, I'm assuming most of you are, but it's a good way to move yourself around a large environment without having to kind of smoothly move yourself using a controller, which can cause more motion sickness. But if you still want to use the smooth locomotion, then that's assigned to the left controller on the presets. And so, for instance, if you have maybe your own personal like modified VizConnect file and you just want to add the Arc Teleport to that, I could just walk you really quickly through those steps. But if you have any questions, you can feel free to ask us as well. But if you go to the advanced configuration and under transports, it's their Arc Teleport. And then you're just going to add a group, which is going to be basically where the Arc Teleport projects from. So then you will drag that group down, for instance, here below the right hand. So that'll trigger the Arc Teleport from your right hand. So this over here is the scene graph where it shows your whole VizConnect kind of layout with your avatar. And then the next step is just mapping the button that you're going to use the Arc Teleport. And then you'll be able to just use that in any of your VizConnect files. And then also there's the snap rotation, which I think that it's a lot more conducive to nausea if you're smoothly rotating yourself. So the snap rotation is maybe a better way to be able to, if you're going to rotate yourself around your environment. And then you can also undo a teleport. So those aren't added by default to the presets, but it's pretty easy to add those just using a VizConnect under events. So events, you can just go and create, like for instance, I have the snap left and snap right event. You just label those, and then you go and assign whatever input button you're going to use to trigger that event. And then there's just a little bit of code that you add to your VizConnect file, and it's pretty simple to add that. And we have some VizConnect files if you need one too that just have those already added. And then I guess now I wanted to move on to a couple of updated avatar workflows. And so the first one I was going to talk about is one called Ready Player Me, which is pretty useful in that you can just take a single selfie and you could go there on their website and either use your webcam or just upload a selfie, and then it'll create this avatar that looks kind of like you. So that's my avatar there. And you can also get a full body avatar. This right here is just showing the head model. And this is here an inspector. So it's pretty easy just for swapping that out. You just want to kind of make sure here at the pivot point that the eyes are matched up right there so that it's kind of at the XYZ position. So I just kind of move that back, and then it's just a little bit of code here. So, and if you need help with this, we also have this on our knowledge base, but this is just showing how you can get the VizConnect file, take the avatar tracker and link it to that Ready Player Me avatar. The next one I wanted to show is Reallusion. So I have that actually open here too. So these are pretty high quality production avatars from a company called Reallusion, and they have a pretty large suite of tools that you can use. And so they have something also for doing a single shot with a selfie, and then it'll map that to a high quality production avatar with your face or whatever face you want to use. And they also have things like in their iClone software where you can use like a phone to do facial mapping if you have like a 3D camera like an iPhone that has that or something, and a whole bunch of tools. You can look on their website for Reallusion, but since we have the FBX integration for avatars, you'll just export it as an FBX, and you can see that here. And then you have, I need to move this. Yeah, and then you have things like facial morphs. So you can see that you can move any of these facial expressions or have different animations that you can trigger and add. And so that's Reallusion. And this is just showing where you can see the facial morphs. And now I'm actually Matthias is gonna take over again and talk about these Microsoft avatars.
Yeah, jumping in here one more time for hopefully the entertainment of everybody. Again, with a little bit of past story and history here, there is another avatar option that's kind of available again to R&D labs and non-commercial use cases, which is based on the former Rocketbox libraries. And some of you who have been doing this for many years might remember that there was very convenient avatar libraries that could be purchased from a company called Rocketbox. And they were basically collections of avatars. Like one of them was like 100, and one of them was 30, and they were pretty high resolution avatars, which had a really nice advantage of having the rigging within the avatars all be consistent. So animations would just translate over from one avatar to the next avatar. And as it always goes, Rocketbox has been purchased by Havok, by the physics engine. Havok has been purchased by Intel, the large chip maker. Eventually, Intel sold Havok to Microsoft, and Microsoft decided to not sell these Rocketbox libraries anymore. So like for the last 4 years or 5 years, they were not available anymore, couldn't be used, and only the people who had purchased them could actually use them. And about like a half a year ago, 3/4 of a year ago, Microsoft thankfully made these characters available again to researchers that are using them non-commercially. And if you want to get access to Vizard, then you have to contact us at this point, because there's some modification needed that are necessary to have them run. But in any case, like, these kind of high quality avatar collections are also available again for R&D labs if it's used in a non-commercial fashion, which is, I think, a great news. And thanks to Microsoft that they did that. Yeah, I think there's one more slide, Pedro, that shows one of the applications that was built like maybe 8 or 9 years ago for an addiction research study. I think it was the NIH was behind it, and the researcher who kind of orchestrated this was named Patrick Bordnick. He's one of the leading addiction researchers with virtual reality and addiction. And in this case, it was a scenario of like a party scene where someone is exposed to an environment that maybe is triggering certain responses in terms of drug use, alcohol and other drugs. And these addiction researchers were trying to figure out like what are the triggers, and also like what can be done to overcome or to cope for someone who has such an addiction. Anyway, obviously very, very useful use cases for virtual reality in general, and it's great that these character libraries are available again for certain research groups. So thanks, Sedo. I drop out here. Back to you.
Okay, and also, I guess really quick while we're talking about avatars, I mean, this is something that's been available since Vizard 6, but if you're not aware, I just wanted to point out that it's very useful. This Mixamo library allows you to auto rig. So if you have, say, for instance, an avatar that you've created in pretty much any 3D modeling program, or if you get a Sketchfab or whatever, as long as it's in the T pose and roughly kind of a humanoid figure, you can use upload it to Mixamo's website, and it'll automatically rig it to a skeleton that will be able to be used in Vizard. And Mixamo also has a huge library of animations that you can download, and they have some characters you can use out there as well. So I just wanted to point that out. And you just go to their website, mixamo.com, and you just need a free Adobe account to be able to access those avatars. And so now I wanted to go on to some of the hardware updates with Vizard 7. So the first thing I was going to talk about is the new Manus Prime 2 gloves that we have now working with Vizard 7. So those now have the full 11 degrees of freedom tracking, including like finger spreading, abduction. I actually have those here. If you can see, there's and so it has improved IMU drift filters. So it has much higher accuracy of the tracking of your fingers. They're wireless. They have a swappable battery, a universal mounting system, so you could use different tracking systems on here, like Xsense and Vive trackers. And then also I want to point out, so speaking of the Vive trackers, there's also the new Steam VR Pro trackers available from Manus that they have more sensors for improved tracking. They're lighter. They also have a swappable battery, and they have a USB-C charging. So those, if you're looking to just add Vive trackers in general, but they could be useful. And they also just will go right there on the Manus gloves, which is the most common way we've used tracking the hands using Vive trackers with the Manus gloves. And just showing you really quick how simple it is just getting those going in Vizard. You just go and get the Manus Core software from your Manus resources. You start it up, plug in the dongle, and turn on the gloves, and then they just work in Vizard. And then you go and calibrate, which now you can calibrate both hands at once, so you can get a faster calibration. And this is the Manus Core software. And then the Vive Cosmos, for most of you are probably familiar with this headset, has the inside-out tracking and swappable faceplate, 2880 by 1700 combined resolution, and a flip-up design. And then the only difference, I guess, on setting this up versus the Vive Pro or whatever is you'd also need to get a Viveport account in addition to a Steam account. So you got to go and download Viveport to get that going. And then the room setup is pretty similar to like the other inside-out tracked headsets, kind of like the Oculus Quest or whatever. You just kind of see the pass-through of your environment and you trace out your room. Pupil Labs is the next one. So we've updated now to Pupil Labs 2.2, which has an improved calibration. And then I wanted to point out with Pupil Labs, that also will go into the Vive Cosmos. So in addition to like your Vive or your Vive Pro or the different headsets that you can put your Pupil Labs device. And if you're not familiar with Pupil Labs, maybe I should point that out too. You could just pop that into any existing headset. So it actually is a device that you could just put in there. And so this is showing on the Vive Cosmos. You just take off that faceplate to be able to pop the cameras in there. And actually, I was going to let Dan kind of talk about this feature. This is speaking of the Vive Cosmos and Pupil Labs. So over to Dan.
Yeah, thanks, Sato. So just popping in for 1 second here. So for those of you who aren't familiar with our VizBox system, it's a portable, shippable PC VR rig. So you can see here from this picture that basically everything we've custom designed, foam holder for the computer, everything fits inside of a Pelican case, and then all of these components actually fit inside of that box there. So the whole idea behind this was to have a system for our remote collaboration applications, where if you didn't have a VR system in-house, we could ship you a system, and you could get it and basically just open the box up, and there'd be no calibration procedure or anything because it's just ready to go. We've set everything up ahead of time. So that was the original intention of the VizBox. It was released 3 or 4 years ago, actually. And as Sato just mentioned, there's now with the support of the Vive Cosmos with its inside-out tracking and the Pupil Labs, which can fit inside the Vive Cosmos, we now have the option to deliver a eye tracking capable VizBox. So if you have research applications that are taking you out in the field and you'd like to bring an eye tracking based, ruggedized, shippable system, that is something that is going to be available from WorldViz very soon. I'm going to hand it over to Matthias really quickly here in just a second. But before I do that, I just wanted to mention we have not received any questions yet. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to open up that question form on the panel there and let us know, and we'll address them in the QA. So now on to Matthias to talk about this new headset, the StarVR.
I'll be obviously happy if there are no questions, if we answered them all, but typically questions, if there are any, are really, really good, because then we can try to really answer what people want to know. Well, this webinar really always jumping in at kind of the cool stuff, which is a nice job. So StarVR One is an HMD that some of you who have been in the industry might remember. They were basically the star of the SIGGRAPH conference in Vancouver. I think that was 3 years ago. And they dominated the conference. Everybody was talking about it. It was really the new kid on the block. And I'm not sure if people know much about human physiology, but human physiology is such that the human field of view, like if you go all the way out to the periphery as far as you can see, is about, for most people, it's about between 200 and 210 degrees. So what this that 210 degree field of view here on the specs means is that you put that StarVR One head-mounted display on, and it effectively covers your complete field of view. That basically, there's no difference in terms of how much you can see in terms of like field of view from reality. You don't have the feeling you have like tunnel vision, but you basically see as much as you can actually see in the real world in terms of field of view. And that is pretty cool, obviously, especially for researchers who want to really simulate reality as close as possible. And so yeah, that StarVR HMD was basically ready and announced, and we had drivers for it, and we had even shown it at that SIGGRAPH show. And then suddenly they went dark because there was some issues with ownership, and they were on the stock market in Taiwan, and that kind of didn't work well. And so they had to restructure the whole business. And at this point, they are up and running again, which is really exciting because that is a really cool HMD. And also from the beginning, they had Tobii eye tracking integrated, which means you also have a high-end eye tracking integration there. And all the bells and whistles like IPD adjustment and everything. And so as of now, the good news is we can sell that again to individual R&D labs or like a research customer base. And if you want one, like, contact us. The price tag for this HMD is $3,200 US. And we think it's super exciting that this is available again. And company is live and kicking, is backed by Acer right now, and so there's really no worries that they will go anywhere, and they're solid. And yeah, it's actually really great to see that HMD as an alternative to many other good HMDs. I don't want to say that's the best HMD out there, but this is certainly a unique HMD for the field of view. So we think it's an exciting development, and as I just said, it's supported with Vizard 7. So with that, back to Seto, who will guide you through the rest of the presentation. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, and then I also just really wanted to quickly point out, just since this is another new headset, the Oculus Quest 2, that this will work with Vizard using the Oculus Link tethered to your PC, or maybe something like virtual desktop if you're wireless, but that's basically just using it as a PC-based headset. And so if you're not familiar with Oculus Link, you could look that up as just connecting basically your USB-C cable to your computer. And the last thing I want to point out, if you're not familiar, you can actually create your own plugins for Vizard using our SDK. And now we've updated the requirement for doing that up to Visual Studio 2019, which is what you would use for compiling extensions for Vizard. And I'm not going to really go into detail of step-by-step how to do that, but all the information is actually in our documentation under reference, and then you go to Vizard SDK, and it does walk you through step-by-step on how to do that. And then, yeah, so that's basically the last thing I wanted to point out on the updates to Vizard 7. And I also wanted to just, I don't know if any of you are looking to add eye tracking to any of your research. We also provide some out-of-the-box eye tracking templates to have all the major things that you might want to do with an eye tracking experiment and be able to get like after review data analysis and things like that. So you can ask us about that if you're interested. And I think with that, I mean, I'll pass it back to Dan and see if you have any more questions, feel free to ask now.
We've just got one question in the chat, and maybe Matthias will be able to answer this one, which is, does 210 help with motion sickness? This is in regards to the StarVR. I don't think that we can say that definitively. Motion sickness, from my perspective, and you guys, jump in if you have anything to add here. But from my perspective, motion sickness is really created by an experience of movement that's not matching up with your body, right? So when I become motion sickness, when I have motion sickness in VR, it's usually because I'm using a controller or a joystick or something to move me around in an environment, and it's just not going with my body. So that's my main experience of motion sickness in VR. Okay, we just got like 10 questions.
Okay, that's good. Well, maybe I can jump in then if you want me to. So, like, obviously doing this for well over 20 years now myself, and initially not having HMDs available that actually are at the same quality or update rate that the HMDs are now. I'm the big guy here on the screen. The motion sickness, as Dan said, the very biggest cause of motion sickness in our experience is that there is a mismatch in terms of specifically perceived navigation, like perceived position changes, with the real inner ear stimuli that people have. Like, basically what I'm trying to say is, if you take a joystick and you move yourself around in a dungeon, going left and right and forward and backward, and you're actually not moving in reality, then that causes for a lot of people motion sickness, and that's really the biggest trigger, right? And then on top of that mismatch, there's other things that could make you feel uneasy, and it depends on the individual, like how strong that is. But these other things are, like, as Oculus and many other HMD makers correctly pointed out, certainly update rate, right? So if the update rate is getting too slow, then that triggers latencies again, and also that at some point gets really disturbing. And in our experience, in the good old days, we set the threshold 60 hertz, but these days most people are shooting for 90 hertz or higher. So that's the motion sickness story. In terms of field of view, a wider field of view, in a way, makes you feel closer to reality, which it's funny enough, it's almost the opposite, makes it more challenging in terms of controlling mismatches, right? Because now with the wide field of view, at least on the field of view side, things are matched so closely to reality that your body is expecting the match of the stimuli to be accurate, right? And when you're so basically, what I'm trying to say is a wider field of view makes it almost more challenging to control for motion sickness. But obviously, if you're able to control for position updates really well, which, for example, one can do, that's why we developed the WorldViz PPT system. If you use PPT, you have that control for position updates. And if you have a large space with PPT, you won't get sick if you do the tracking correctly. But that makes these kind of parameters more challenging. So if you have a wider field of view.
Yeah.
But with that, I think I hand it back to Dan or to Sado.
Oh, yeah. I was just going to add too, like, so with a wider field of view, you would probably be even more, like, you would less want to use a motion control, like a move yourself smoothly through an environment using like an Xbox controller or something, because your peripheral vision might actually be more sensitive to that movement. And so that would, yeah, like Matthias was saying, having a large scale walking system or doing some way of not just kind of catapulting yourself through the scene with a larger headset like that, because it is closer to, yeah, how you expect to see things react.
Yeah. When you use an HMD like that, if money is not an issue, the best way of doing is to use a precise position tracking system like a PPT or a Vicon or something that is a very high-end position tracking system, costs a bunch of money. But if you use that with an HMD like that, then it's a wonderful experience and it feels extremely real. But obviously, it's a matter of how much money someone has and how controlled the environment is that they can use and how much walking space also they have, right? But it can be a wonderful thing and it feels extremely close to reality if you do that.
Yeah, and that's also where you could
just by itself, it doesn't help against motion sickness to have more field of view, sadly. No.
And with that question on the SDK,
yeah,
I guess.
So you guys can see the other questions that we posted here. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you would actually write your plugin using C++ because it's in Visual Studio, and you just write it is in C++ code for writing the plugin, but interfacing with writing your actual programs would still be in Python once it's opened up in Vizard. If that answers the question. I mean, if I guess if you need more clarification, you could email us afterwards too. And although on the one with the Quest 2, yeah, connecting wirelessly, it depends on your router. So if you have like a 5G router, then you're going to get a better kind of speed. I mean, and I also wanted to mention, speaking of that, there's another headset called the Pico Neo 2 that allows you to use SteamVR to connect wirelessly with Vizard, which that works. And I get the full 75 hertz frame rate of the headset using their way of wirelessly streaming, but that's kind of their own like integrated wireless streaming, which isn't using virtual desktop. I actually haven't had a lot of experience using virtual desktop. I've used other similar programs, so I'm not sure how well it streams, but I do know that it's very dependent on your router's speed, like your local network speed.
Usually that's the router speed is one aspect for wireless, and then obviously how cluttered your environment is with other networks is another aspect, right? Because there's only so much data that can go to the like bandwidth that's available. And if you have a lot of people using wireless for streaming videos and stuff like that, then that might take up a lot of that bandwidth, and that might impact your connectivity and your update rate, right? So there is these factors that are all going together. So it's not easy to give a straight answer, but when we set up anything that's wireless, then we set it up with very, very high-end special routers, like wireless routers. So.
Okay. It doesn't look like we have any other questions. I mean, you could always email us additional questions you might have.
Yeah, there was one question that I've just seen. The last one here on that list was basically, are these slides available later on? And the answer is, like, we're actually publishing these webinars like usually a few days after they happen on the WorldViz YouTube channel. So there is if you punch in WorldViz YouTube, their YouTube channel comes up and you see a section called webinars. You can also see the previous webinars. And so on these webinars, you can then basically see the slides again. If you want the slides directly, you have to email us. I'm not sure if we can distribute the slides as it is, because we would have to look at copyrights of images and stuff like that. That's something that I can't answer on the fly here, but certainly you can get access to the recorded webinar if you want to see them again.
Yeah, I think that pretty much does it for this webinar. So we'll be sending out a survey. If y'all don't mind letting us know your thoughts, and then any follow-up questions that you have there, you can contact us by email on the form on our website, on our user forum, support@worldviz.com if you're a WorldViz support holder. So we look forward to seeing you all using Vizard 7 and the projects that you come up with. And thanks again for joining us. We'll sign this out from here.
Thanks.
Thanks, Dan.
Shut this thing down.